Good morning, webinar attendees. My name is Melissa Bauer, and I am the Member Sustainability Manager here at the Pet Sustainability Coalition. So thank you so much for joining us this morning or afternoon or evening or wherever it is that you are calling from. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're going to give people a few more minutes to join, but we'll be right back. And thanks again for joining us. All right, good morning again. We've got a pretty full house today and a lot of exciting material to go over. So I'm going to jump in. Like I said, my name is Melissa Bauer and I am the Member Sustainability Manager with the Pet Sustainability Coalition. And I'm so excited to have you all joining us today. A little bit of housekeeping. Everybody who registered for the webinar today will be receiving both a copy of a recording of our time together today and also a copy of the deck that we're going to go through. We're going to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions. The way that that will work is you should all have a question or chat box on your platform. So please feel free to put in a question there at any time during the presentation, and we'll be making sure to get as many of those questions answered as we can at the end. So just a little bit of background about who we are. Like I said, we are the Pet Sustainability Coalition. We are a nonprofit industry association of pet companies from all over the world coming together to move the pet industry as a whole in a more sustainable direction. The way that we help our members do that is through a three-part model of education, providing tools and resources along with webinars like this, inspiration, providing events where the industry as a whole can come together to discuss and brainstorm around important sustainability ideas, and then action. We are here to help our members advance their environmental and social performance. In that vein, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I hope that you'll stop by our website and check out our toolkit, which covers these 6 areas and includes dozens and dozens of resources, some of which you'll see below, everything including a supply chain code of conduct or purchasing policy to green team walkthrough building exercises, energy efficiency, everything of that nature. Today, we're going to be focusing on a topic in our webinar that fits into kind of the supply chain and packaging bucket. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Peter from Plastic Neutral at Repurpose Global, who is a huge trooper. He's actually calling in today. It's in the middle of the night in Bangladesh, so we're so excited that he can join us today and share some amazing information about plastic offsets. So I will hand things over to you, Peter.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Ooh, turn it off. I can.
Perfect. Let's see.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the warm introduction. Good morning, everybody. My name is Peter Wong Yamdal. I'm a co-founder, chief marketing officer at Repurpose, and we are a global community of conscious consumers and businesses going plastic neutral. Just want to start by saying a big round of thank you and gratitude for Melissa and the Pet Sustainability Coalition for inviting me to this webinar. I think it's super exciting to have a group of passionate, talented people come together to solve challenges as big as sustainability, climate change, and today plastic pollution. So I just want to jump in here straight away. 4 parts to the webinar, from first going through and breaking down the real challenges that your businesses face every single day with plastic and plastic packaging, and going to then to our plastic neutral solutions and how it actually works. So I think everybody here today is here for that, to understand what that is. And thirdly, how we actually help you create that impact on the ground, as well as from a business metric standpoint, both environmentally and socially. And fourth, one of these in space to answer your questions as well, because I'm sure you'll have many. So yeah, just jumping straight into it. Here is the 3 challenges that we see with plastic and plastic pollution, plastic packaging and use of plastic in your supply chains. Number 1, I mean, food and snacks and within the pet industry, I mean, there's a lot of use of multi-laminated packaging, flexible packaging that is, you know, as you guys probably already aware, is either technically unrecyclable due to the layers of plastic and aluminum and other kinds of metals in the packaging itself, or it's technically recyclable, but is usually just never recycled in practice because of its low value. And that is something that is a big challenge and a big worry for consumers who are buying the product as well. Challenge number 2, I think here it's kind of a challenge and an opportunity, and together, right? I think that's kind of where we think that at Repurpose, we truly believe that plastic is not the enemy, but plastic waste is. And that reflects in the performance of the material, right? It's a magical material, it's valuable, it has a lot of downsides as well, but then has a tremendous amount of upsides with durability, with product performance, as well as safety, with pet products being, you know, toys being chewed by dogs and not wanting to end up in, in pieces in their stomachs. I mean, it's a remarkable material and has a real indispensable value in your supply chains as well. And thirdly, I think here is where we feel like that, the sustainability craze is amazing and it's great for the environment. But at the end of the day, there's also a lot of misguided switches from plastic to other kinds of materials that are sometimes worse for the environment. The Danish government released a LCA life cycle assessment showing that just one of those products, paper bags instead of plastic bags in the grocery store, you have to use a paper bag more than 40 times, reuse that bag over 40 times before it actually becomes environmentally better than using a plastic bag once and ending up in the landfill. So really, there's a lot of misguided switches, and alternatives to plastic are either worse for the environment, or sometimes are cost prohibitive, better for the environment but cost prohibitive, or other solutions like reuse and reship, and sometimes can just be logistically infeasible in the short run. And that's basically this slide where we summarize those 3 pain points into one, is the fact that there is a real gap between what consumers want and expect and demand from businesses that they purchase from on a daily basis, and what companies like yours can afford to actually do in that time frame. While there's a gap between what consumers want and what businesses are able to do, the real victim here is our planet, where in the next 5 to 10 years, billions more plastic items will end up in the environment unless we kind of find a way to stem the flow of that today. So a little more before the solution, I mean, why we think that the pet industry today is in a perfect position to actually solve this challenge. Number 1, obviously, we all know that plastic is widely used, right? So packaging is obviously a big area, big kind of, consumption or environmental footprint area within your broader footprint as a company, so that's for sure. And number 2, I think this is where the most important reason lies, is where your customers really care about this. There is a almost perfect match between the demographics that care about ocean plastic and climate change with pet owners. And we know this because we also work with consumers, and we help consumers, individuals anywhere in the world, go plastic neutral and subscribe for about $2 to $4 a month to offset their plastic footprints. And we see that there's a match, right? College educated, middle class and above, homeowners, skewed female, 25, 40. I mean, these are the same demographics that are also pet owners. And there's a real opportunity for you to tackle this problem, to not only obviously better the environment, but also to give your customers what they want and demand. And thirdly, this is a bit of an unusual point, but I think it's important to bring that up, is that plastic and taking action on plastic is not just solving an environmental problem. It's also solving a social economic problem and solving a animal conservation and animal protection issue as well, where it's, that is tied to every brand every business that is on here today. I mean, the care and affection for animals is a deep part of your DNA that it can be perfectly resonated and demonstrated by taking an action that is endangering species both on land as well as in water. So that's where, there's a bunch of pieces we just spoke about here, challenges with switching away from plastic, consumer expectations, and why we think it's a perfect time to solve this for your industry. I think that's where we bridge the pieces of the puzzle together and launch the world's first plastic credit platform, where inspired by carbon credit and carbon compensation, we help individuals and businesses go plastic neutral by measuring, reducing, and compensating for their unique plastic footprints. So the way it works is honestly very simple. We are a platform between two players. On the one side, producers of plastic waste, that being brands or individuals or businesses, and on the other side, innovations, removers of plastic waste in the developing world, where these are organizations with experience and actually working on creating recycling systems, where for every 50 cents contributed to our platform by our global community of plastic neutral businesses and consumers, we guarantee to remove and recycle 1 additional kilogram of plastic waste otherwise landfilled, burned, or flushed into the oceans. And before I go into, I'm sure you guys are curious about how we actually do that, but before, I just want to make sure that you guys understand how this side, on the left side, it actually works with your engagement with the business. So really, plastic crediting is a big concept, and we applied it in 3 different ways. The most primary way is plastic neutral products, where we help your product lines go plastic neutral, and we do that in 3 steps. So number 1 is measuring your footprints in your packaging. That is something that is already quite known to all of you. I mean, you guys are obviously have a perfect understanding of what goes in your product, and you guys know how much you're selling per year. And that's a simple multiplication equation there to understand your packaging and plastic footprint. And second is where the neutrality comes in, is where we help you compensate for that footprint by taking out the same amount of plastic that you put into the environment. And we do that with vetted innovations and social enterprises all across the world. And it's worthwhile to note that it almost always costs less than a penny on a dollar of sales. That's less than a cent on a dollar of sales to do something like this, which I think is not only, it's a kind of maybe a philosophical lesson for us as well, that it actually only costs very little to actually clean up the mess that we have created as a society overall. And thirdly is where plastic neutrality for us, and it's not just compensation, it's not just offsets, it's also reduction and a broader framework to enable further change. And we do that by helping you essentially create a roadmap to enable you to reduce the amount of virgin plastic and help you set and meet tangible and uniquely personalized targets to reduce the amount of virgin plastic you use in your supply chains. So number 1, that design, and that is perfectly fitted for the manufacturer of the consumer good. But there's also, I understand, retailers of pet products here as well, and we also help you and basically offer through Everyday Neutral an opportunity for your customers to opt in and actually offset the unique plastic footprints of their purchases on a daily basis. So it's perfectly fitted with your e-commerce solutions, where it's at the point of sale and it's often no more than 50 US cents to actually offset the footprints of their purchases with you on a daily basis. And the attractive thing here about this is that it's absolutely no cost to the business. In the previous example, obviously, you are going plastic neutral and getting that certification. But in this case, if you're a retailer and you're sharing other products, it makes a lot of sense to actually engage and offer your consumers a way to join you in your sustainability journey and take climate action with literally just a tick. And thirdly, with honest plastic, and we understand that brands and you guys are looking into increasing the amount of post-consumer recycled PCR content in your supply chain. But I think what most of us don't know here today is that recycled plastic has a very dark side as well. And the fact that most of recycled plastic today is untraceable and completely at risk of being tainted with child labor, unethical practices, bad labor conditions, as well as less than minimum wages. That's because that maybe the supplier of that end plastic resin, not the resin, but the plastic granule or the yarn or something like polyester yarn might be in the formal sector, but there are often 5, 6 layers of the supply chain before that. And a lot of that exploitation happens in the first mile, in collection and in processing. And that's where we say that, in the rush towards increasing recycled plastic, we don't want brands and businesses to actually have that reputational risk. The same way that there's a massive backlash and PR a nightmare for apparel companies when there was discovered that there is a ton of bad things that are happening in their supply chains. We don't want that to happen to the recycled plastic conversation and increasing the amount of recycled plastic in your packaging. And that's where we essentially supply you honest plastic through the same global network of innovations and waste management social enterprises that would do the offsets through, and kind of tackle that with a variety of interventions around software using a blockchain system to track and verify impact, actual hard work on the ground of education subsidies, health insurance provision, and a couple other measures to actually instill ethical practices, as well as linking up our partners in different parts of the world to your supply chain to make sure that this honest plastic is not just sounds good, but actually works for your supply chain as well. So that very briefly is a kind of an executive summary of what we do. And I'm sure you guys are super curious about how we actually do this on the ground. How do we actually do the plastic offsets? And I want to do that. I want to explain that, and I want to be able to give you guys and that download. And the way I want to do that is going back to where it started, because the way we run the impact, the philosophy of how we do it goes back to our story, how we actually started. Really about 2.5 years ago, when my co-founders Fanaka, Adi, and I actually visited one of Asia's largest landfills in Mumbai in India out of a serendipitous research trip from Wharton, and where we got out of the car, and when we were kind of we were covering our noses really from the thick stench of this landfill, and we realized that we're standing between mountains of plastic on the one end, and on the other end, the infinite skyline of India's financial capital, and realized that something went wrong, simply with the way that our society consumes and disposes on a daily basis. But the problem here goes way deeper than that. And there's a super unknown and yet urgent humanitarian crisis associated with our plastic waste epidemic. And it's that there are millions of informal workers who are engaged with informal recycling on a daily basis and dealing with the consequences of our consumption. And doing so are true environmental heroes in our society, but are simply not equipped. And for them, the formal supply chain is never built out, and they they're forced to remain underground. Even though they are providing an amazing environmental service in different parts of the world. And as we dug deeper into this problem and got embedded in the informal recycling supply chain starting from Mumbai and in India and then now across the developing world, we have found a host of solutions. And these are waste management, social enterprises, circular innovations who are really have very real and tangible solutions, scalable solutions to our plastic epidemic, but are simply underfunded. And because of that, they don't have the ability to actually scale up their environmental or social economic impact. And that's where we formed the theory of change, and being that platform and connector between the brand and these amazing innovations on the ground, and to finance them and enable their further scale up through your plastic neutrality contributions. So it's been a whirlwind of 2-3 years, and what we hear today is we are currently operating our organizations and partners on the ground are operating in over 7 countries, over 9 different partners at this point. And these are organizations, this is in Africa, in South America, in Southeast Asia, and South Asia. These organizations have decades of experience in doing this on the ground and building local systems, but are simply, need those crucial doses of climate finance to actually scale up their environmental impact. So a little more about how we actually do this. A lot of you guys here today are sustainability professionals and are maybe familiar with the carbon credit methodology, and that's exactly what we have borrowed and made better. And being inspired by that, we as a team, we're obsessed with concept of additionality, and that's the key concept around how we actually make sure that your money is actually creating impact, 100% additionality over ground. And the key concept is the following: the amount of money that we contribute to our supply chains on the ground, our partner supply chains, need to create tangible additional environmental impact, additional quantifiable plastic impact beyond the status quo. And that is the three ways that we currently do that in different parts of the supply chain across reduce, reuse, as well as recycle. So number one, I think all of us, maybe some of you guys are familiar with the problem of low value plastic. You see, plastic waste and plastic is not all born equal, right? So you have a lot of high value plastic resins like PET and HDPE, which is widely recycled in the developed and the developing world. But there is so much more low value plastic out there: polypropylene, LDPE, multi-laminate packaging, which is used in flexible packaging in your products, is never recycled, and that's simply because it's too low value. And that's where we come in and subsidize the cost of recovering and recycling that low value plastic waste that would have otherwise definitely been dumped in landfill, being flushed into the oceans, and being ingested by marine animals, as well as being burned openly and releasing toxins in the environment. And secondly, is where we also, instead of just funding operational subsidies on an ongoing basis for certain parts of the plastic waste management supply chain, we also invest into new supply chains that are desperately needed in areas with lackluster infrastructure. These are typically our rural areas in India, Indonesia, and the Philippines. These are island nations, which doesn't even have an informal sector. And that's where we're coming and finance that and putting that crucial capital in the beginning to enable that facility to actually take in waste and from all categories, not just plastic, to instead of end up in status quo, which is usually landfill, and claiming that additionality, because that money would have never been there and that facility would have never been there if we haven't been there, or if you, rather, the brand, hasn't been there to go plastic neutral and enable us to actually fund that supply chain. And thirdly, this is a little innovative and definitely avant-garde as well, is where we not just think about recycling. We are going beyond recycling, just doing offsets by recycling, because we understand that recycling is still a short and medium-term solution. What we need to do is actually reduce the amount of plastic that we use in the world. And there are a host of solutions, again, across reduce, across reuse, as well as redesign. These are bioplastic, coffee cup deposit schemes, chemical recycling, robotic arms in the material recovery facility. I mean, these innovations are early stage, but are simply needs a lot more funding to commercialize and enable their scale up, where we essentially quantify their impact track record. How many tons of plastic were your innovation were able to tangibly take out and reduce and avoid from the environment in the past year, and quantify that and creditize that, and sell that as credits to consumers and businesses in exchange for essentially using that money to enabling the further crucial scale up to actually systemically change the way that we think about circular economy as a whole, beyond just recycling. So a little more about kind of the social economic impact. Definitely, there is a tremendous amount of good that we're doing and income that we're adding for impoverished women and children who are in many places and are culturally bounded and historically marginalized into these occupations, especially in India, where traditionally has been a caste system. And here, we've heard stories of, and we've met family members of people and children who have, picking up waste on top of a landfill, on top of a heap of trash. And because the waste is mixed between both plastic and food waste, methane gas basically gets produced and produces fire that buries people alive. And oftentimes, left to be unfound for sometimes weeks and and years as well. And these are horrific and tragic stories. And for us, what we're doing here is also enabling and adding that income to these workers who are so crucial to the current system of handling waste in these countries, as well as can be a crucial role and play that central role in the global circular economy going forward. Just quickly going through this about how we actually do the verification. As a third-party platform, we work with partners, and that value out of being that third-party independent platform is that we can actually be objective and checking what's actually going on the ground, again, with a variety of different tools across software, like a blockchain system, blockchain-enabled technology tracking system, to on the ground full-time staff, to spot checks, as well as a project standard that we adhere to for everything that we do on the ground. So just capping off here a little bit about how we actually, we've spoken a lot about the actual impact, what the impact of plastic neutrality is on the ground. We like to think of ourselves as not just an agency for environmental change, but also to help you market and tell the story to your consumers and improve your business metrics as well. For us, at the end of the day, with the plastic neutral certification, helps you stand out on the aisle, on social media, and with an audience that, again, as I mentioned before, who really deeply cares about our environment. This being an effortless stepping stone, instead of kind of working on supply chain changes, which takes a lot of time, adopt plastic neutrality as a framework, offsets as a way to create impact now that is not only visible as well as marketable. And comparing ourselves against other initiatives such as carbon neutrality, it's much easier for consumers who don't have as an in-depth knowledge as all of you guys have about sustainability, much easier for the person to visualize about what plastic neutrality is versus carbon neutrality. And not to mention that it's on average 6 times more affordable to go plastic neutral versus taking your company carbon neutral. This is just a spread of many different kinds of marketing projects. We, again, are not just environmental change enablers, we're also marketers. And we are in line with the trends, and we produce stories on the ground, from videos to photos to illustrations, social media collaterals, to help you and enable you tell that story, and on packaging, on social, and on email, on PR, across various, any marketing medium you can think of, to help you blast this accomplishment and tell the story in the best way possible to get your consumers engaged, to retain your consumers, your customers, your current customers longer, as well as acquire new customer bases who are super eco-conscious as well. And that's another way that we do this connection as well, where we are not just helping businesses, we're also a venture that works with and helps consumers go plastic neutral. And we developed actually the world's first plastic footprint calculator, and where 3 minutes, and on our website you can actually enable you to calculate your plastic footprint anywhere in the world. And this is an amazing connection between both, where you can not only say, hey, we have gone plastic neutral, or we have offered a plastic neutral shopping experience through a checkbox at the point of sale. Here you can also invite your consumers to actually come on board with your journey as well, and take and give them that call to action that goes beyond you telling them that we have done something, but beyond, hey, join us as well and calculate your plastic footprint, understand your impact, and compensate for it as well. We are global at this point. We have a variety of businesses in food and beverage and health and beauty, professional services, and we are super excited to bring this to the pet industry as well. I'll probably end it there. And the last thing I want to say is that this is a format where is not customized information. I would love the opportunity to talk to you guys individually as well. So feel free to sign up through this link that is currently on this link. And again, we'll distribute this presentation as Melissa said as well. But feel free to sign up for a 30-minute free consultancy session for us to help you objectively kind of evaluate and help you better understand and communicate your sustainability strategy as well. So I'll probably just end it there and take any questions. But we're super excited. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a new decade. It's 2020, and we know it's the last decade for us to seriously reverse climate change. That's I'll stop there, and Melissa, over to you.
Yeah, Peter, wow, thank you for a awesome presentation. I know that when we first met at the Sustainable Packaging Coalition a couple of months ago, this plastic offsets and plastic neutrality was new for me. So it's really, really exciting. We do have a couple of questions. I would invite everyone on the call, if you have any more, please feel free to start shooting those into the question box, and I will make sure we get to as many as we can. The first question is, Peter, you talked a little bit about low value plastics versus high value plastic, and that plastic itself isn't kind of the enemy, but just that plastic waste is. And we have a question about, can you furthermore define as what you're defining as high value plastic versus low value plastic?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So high value plastic, again, this different in different markets and different scenarios in different parts of the world. But roughly speaking, the high value materials are the ones that are usually recycled, which is essentially PET and HDPE. These are usually the common denominators across different supply chains. So that's your plastic bottles, your milk jugs, and low value plastic, again, is different, right? And there's also different grades within others. So essentially, if you think about your resin grade 1 through 3 is somewhat high value, but 3 through 7 is essentially low value plastic waste, which is maybe technically recyclable, sometimes, oftentimes also not technically recyclable, but then never usually fetches a value, and that's a variety of reasons, right? So high value. So I've spoken here about resin grade, right? So so I guess going back with low value plastic, like your LDP film, your flexible packaging, whatever is usually more flexible, as well as anything that is compounded, right? So if it was mixed with any other things, if it was different resin grades mixed together, or if it's, for example, like even some paper products, if you think about your regular coffee cup, a lot of that coffee cup is lined with a very thin and this is paper-based cups, and paper-based cups that are lined with thin and almost invisible a plastic film on the inside to ensure kind of insulation of heat and stop leakage. That also is low value plastic because of materials being compounded and used together, and that renders it unrecyclable and inseparable and therefore unrecyclable. And even within high value plastic, even think about PET, there's a lot of PET kinds that are also unrecyclable, especially colored PET. So you think about your Sprite bottle versus your Coke bottle, for example. That is a good example where Sprite bottles usually fetch a lot lower values because it's colored and will contaminate any other clear PET. So it really, you can define it roughly by resin grade, but it really is depending, even within the resin grades, even the HDPE and the PET still has low value products within those high value waste streams as well.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got lots of questions coming in. I appreciate it. Keep them coming. We've got a great question from Nikki. She asks, in terms of misguided switches, in your opinion, what would be better for the environment? Packaging made from mono-material plastic, or packaging not made from plastic but is made from multiple materials like aluminum or paper?
Yeah, I think I would love to be able to answer that question on the spot, but honestly, I won't be able to like confidently give you an answer like unless I know what the scenario is about. So feel free to reach out to me personally. I'm Peter at repurpose.global. But on a general basis, I mean, I would say yes, as a rule of thumb. Mono material plastic, and obviously trying to use not the low value materials but high value materials, and but compared to other goods. I think the biggest thing that we got to think about here is basically, there is a massive environmental impact in the wrongful disposal of plastic in the environment, but the bigger part of the carbon impact, right, the global warming potential impact of packaging comes in the manufacturing, transportation, and distribution. And that's because paper and aluminum simply weighs more compared to a plastic item, right? So I think that's where I think it depends on a case by case basis, but that is my short generic answer to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little bit more complicated,
Yeah,
and on a product by product basis. Yeah. We've got a great question from Cherie, and she's asking about the platform itself. Can companies choose specific products that the credits go to? For example, it would be cool to pick ones that are, specifically in line with their brand, or does it just kind of go into a general fund?
No, definitely. It's all custom engagements with every brand. It's the product lines, yeah, definitely only the, if you think about not just the entire company, but just certain product lines, definitely like the ones that, maybe more premium, eco-friendly, organic, earth-based, or raw, that kind of stuff. I think that's something that is a good start as a testing point, right? Where it may not be the whole company, but definitely catering to each product. And again, our marketing messaging as well, which I spoke a little bit about. It's very much tailored to your brand and to your product line within that brand. And on the offset side, again, it's custom. You can choose your projects, and we often advise you, right? So, for example, we had a seafood brand based in California called Safe Cash was going plastic neutral with us, and for them, they pride themselves on using organic seafood and fishing and ethically. And so we onboarded a fisherman ocean plastic recovery project just on their behalf in Kerala in India, where it's empowering the same people that are involving their supply chains in manufacturing that seafood and that tuna, and basically using and giving fishermen the financing and the equipment necessary to, while they're out in the oceans, collect not just fish but also plastic to be extracted from the oceans into the recycling supply chain. So very much customized based on, like, we even think about from an offset perspective, we think about your branding and your product positioning as well, and be able to match that as to the best of our abilities.
Awesome. One more question, or not one more, there'll probably be more, but another question about the platform itself. Is the 50 cents a kilogram of plastic the best overall estimate of the cost of the seal, or are there all other cost factors for the company as well?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I didn't want to bring in the pricing strategy because I didn't want to make this too complicated. I may just give you some time for this PowerPoint to scroll through the pricing slide. But yes, it is that is the base pricing that we have to essentially help you go plastic neutral. And we essentially there are a couple other tiers as well, more premium versions, where we essentially not only just do plastic neutral, and guaranteeing the ethical and authorized and verified removal and avoidance of plastic from the environment, but also additional. I mentioned that we also engage with these waste picker colonies and waste picking informal settlements and on social economic empowerment projects, at additional kind of pricing tier as well, where it's not just doing the environmental impact, but also telling that social impact story for those brands out there who wish to make that impact on marginalized women and children and workers in the sector alongside the environmental impact, as well as PN with innovations, right? So that new thing that we mentioned about kind of the offsets, not just being recycling, but also towards other kinds of organizations. There's also that tier as well. But then for bigger brands, we also do customized engagements where, if your cost of offset exceeds $1 million a year, we recommend you to engage with us to basically invest into new infrastructure upfront in the effort of reducing that per kilogram pricing cost going forward.
Great, great. Peter, we're rewinding just a little bit. We've got a really great question from Betsy. Betsy, hi, thanks for joining us. You mentioned the paper bags versus plastic bags and how environmental solutions that are marketed to us as beneficial. So, like if you go to the grocery store and you forget your reusable bags, we're choosing paper because we're being told that's better. Can you elaborate a little bit about why the solutions like the paper bags that are marketed to us as more environmentally friendly because we're being told that all plastic is bad, why that might not necessarily be the case?
Yeah, for sure. So again, I was maybe a little bit of an overlap with the other question as well. The footprint of paper production, it is the reason why we think that the reason why it's marketed as more environmentally friendly. I mean, it's because of the fact that it's more recyclable. That is no questions about it, right? Paper recycling is a lot more prevalent and a lot more commercially viable as a sector in different parts of the world than plastic recycling. But again, the problem here is the carbon footprint as a whole of where it was manufactured, where that paper was manufactured, the transportation between the different manufacturing units, transporting that paper, which weighs heavier, right, than your plastic, and takes up more fuel into distribution, into retail, and into the consumer's hands, and back into recycling. That's where the impact really lies. And if you look at the carbon footprint of plastic, a lot of it is, again, which is why it's called reduce, reuse, recycle, right? Because reduce is obviously better than recycle, because a lot of that footprint can be avoided in the first place if that product was never used in the first place. So that also alongside with other things like bioplastic, for example. If you see a lot of bioplastic products today, a compostable plastic, for example, consumers are so confused about they think it's plastic because it looks like plastic and it feels like plastic, and they will throw it in the recycling bin, and that contaminates the recycling stream as well. So bioplastic, again, it's marketable and it's compostable, but then if the consumer is not throwing to the right place, it actually end up contaminating other possibly recyclable products in your bin as well. So that's where again, so it's kind of it's a tricky question because there's a lot of stakeholders involved. And again, it also depends on the individual scenario, but that's the general gist.
Great explanation, thanks. I just want to say we're going to get to as many of these questions as we can, that if we miss yours, please feel free to reach out to myself. Please feel free to reach out to Peter, and we are happy to continually engage in this conversation. We've got a really great question from Jonah. I'm really excited to hear your answer too. Is engaging with companies and them going plastic neutral and them paying for this fee and consumers paying for this fee, do you think that will lead to better efficiency long term, or do you think that this fee is going to be, moving into the future, a fixed number that we're going to need to maintain to make recycling profitable?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the biggest gap that we see. I've worked in different impact sectors, and I've always seen financing to be the biggest challenge. And nowhere else have I seen funding and financing to be the bigger challenge that within the recycling and the resource efficiency sector, right? Where essentially there's underfunding everywhere, right? And that is really kind of the core kind of impact proposition, the long-term kind of impact of a platform like ours, which is essentially enabling you to do that and funding. I mean, just in 5 countries alone in Asia, there's a $5 billion financing gap every single year towards effective management of plastic waste. And that's five countries just in Asia, right? And imagining scam to being viral, that's at least $100 billion gap. The money that we need to actually effectively scale up these infrastructure. So if you really think about the impact of offsets, we are enabling the circular economy as a whole by investing into this infrastructure that is anyways needed, right? And that is the crucial difference also between plastic neutrality and carbon neutrality. With carbon neutrality is that you're offsetting your emissions that are to do with manufacturing, with cook stove distribution, or with renewable energy, and that's why people it's hard to convince them that it's not greenwashing, because how can you equate your footprints with manufacturing and somehow eliminate that by investing to offset projects that are completely unrelated to the sector? And it kind of goes alongside of why plastic neutrality is different, and that answers your question as well, which is that it invests back into the circular economy, and infrastructure and these innovations are needed in order to solve our systemic problem, right? And that goes back to the 3 challenges that we identified in the beginning. One of those challenges is that alternative solutions are cost prohibitive. And to bring down that cost, we have to put more dollars and more money into these innovations and infrastructure to enable their scale up, to bring that cost down further for adoption from you guys, from the businesses.
Great. All right, we're going to do one more quick question from David. This is a great question. He wants to know if you are currently seeking new partners for removing the plastic for the ocean. Are you looking for new NGOs to partner with, or where are you in that process?
We're always on the lookout for sure. Yeah, we are rapidly expanding, and are in need for a lot more partners. The slide that we have right here, it was from when I made this, one of these, I think it was a month ago, and now we have 3 more. So we definitely want more, and would like more suggestions with innovations, because we can never scour the ocean, I guess.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm sorry we didn't make it to all of the questions, but please, stay engaged on this topic with both Peter and myself. I know that we're excited to talk about this kind of new technology. I also want to invite you to join us for our next webinar in February. We'll be talking to QAI, who will be talking about a role that pet industry can play in expanding the use of organics in our food systems here in the US. While we see a really huge growing demand for organic products, less than 1% of all farmland is dedicated to growing organic. So what can the pet industry do to be helping expand those systems and meet this consumer demand for our organic products? So I want to thank Peter so much for joining us, especially in the middle of the night from halfway across the world. And if you have any questions, please reach out to either Peter or myself. We'll be getting you that information shortly. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Peter, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.